Okay, we're good now.
Sure.
Sorry.
Welcome for this August 9, 2018 Designers Board meeting. We are aware that Douglas Harpster, Kerry Harpster, and Gary Martin won't be attending today. There are no prior meeting minutes available at this time. Our main item today is a discussion of possible amendments to a Section 3540.2 that allows movable sign and outdoor furniture in the downtown placed on the front sidewalks. The amendment would also allow those to be placed in public alleyways, and that would allow for staff approval of movable signs and outdoor furniture permit applications rather than coming before the full design review board each time when those come in. Our original ordinance took place in 1999, but some of the background on this is the C4 district was first established in 1977, and the city's current zoning ordinance was adopted. The C4 district was designed to provide for a broad range of retail and other commercial uses. In 1999, staff was approached by Salina Downtown requesting the development of a policy or program where some types of aesthetic improvements and amenities could be placed on the sidewalks in front of buildings or in adjacent plazas. These amenities were intended to contribute to the variety and character of the pedestrian experience in the downtown and consisted mainly of tables, chairs, small movable signs that would allow outdoor dining, but there would not be products or services offered within the shop on the sidewalk. Those would still take place in the place of business. These portable signs and outdoor furniture were intended to be located on the sidewalks and plazas immediately adjacent to the building facade, and they would only be displayed during business hours and removed at other times. The movable sign and outdoor furniture ordinance 3540.2 was approved by the City Commission in 1999. A set of guidelines were adopted, and copies of the permit application and brochure were distributed to new business in the downtown. And something I've noted that is these sidewalk signs and outdoor furniture applications are always business specific. If a new business moves into a location occupied by a former business, they would also have to produce an application and have that reviewed and approved by the design review board. In 2014, there was updates to the ordinance itself that they were meant to allow movable flower pots, and movable planters, and bicycle racks to the list of items to be produced on the outside of businesses. And Desta, we could go through the publisher examples there. Some of the signs themselves, this is a trifecta, having a sidewalk sign as well as outdoor benches. Recently, this is further down the street on Iron Avenue for the location of a coffee grinding shop. These were all 3 foot maximum by 4 foot tall. And this is Flower Nook, which shows outdoor planters as well as a sidewalk sign. We have had applications in the past where Martinelli's has came in and applied for outdoor furniture. Although these are placed on the business to the north, that same furniture is used on the Chuck Carroll building at Martinelli's and this adjacent space when that's occupied. As well as at Astra, they came in and applied for sidewalk dining tables. And this shows an older photograph. Right now they do have 2 bike racks as well as a permanent bike rack there. With the beginnings of the downtown streetscape project underway and the disruption of Santa Fe access and parking, building and business owners have begun to place a greater emphasis on the rear entrances of their buildings and how to make them more noticeable and attractive. Exterior wall treatments and wall signage are part of that, but staff has also received interest from businesses about placing movable signs and planters in the rear alleys as well. The current sidewalk sign ordinance, if we can have that up, Dustin, is meant to allow for movable flower pots, planters, bicycle racks, and business hours only placement of movable signs and outdoor furniture. We've been operating with this since 2014. And on our next slide, we do show what our proposed amendments are today. And basically taking down through here, the ordinance now takes into account that alleyways would be added to the ordinance as a location for movable signs, planters, and outdoor furniture. This also picks up that repetition. What is intended is that the Salina Business Improvement Design Board would not always review these applications, that they would fall to city staff, and that would allow you to focus on the major points of the downtown while we take these, because they do get quite numerous, and we're expecting quite a bit during the downtown revitalization to come in. So that is intended to always default to the design board to meet, produce a staff report, and have the applicants come in for each item that they place out there. And what staff would review is in conformance with the ordinance itself, as well as adding an appeal process if the a written notice of denial is provided to an applicant by staff. On staff approval, they would have the option of appealing that to the full board of the design review board as a public meeting. And that is a fail-safe that if they feel they wanted to come before you and argue the case on their type of sidewalk sign, that they could. And staff would produce a staff report as well for that. So in those cases, you would meet whether there are denials or appeals processes. And then the final paragraph there allows the city manager to change portions of the ordinance and how that is dealt with, rather than locking it into a rigid ordinance. It will allow for amendments in the future, similar to what we're looking at today, and those would be produced and taken to the City Commission as an amendment to today's ordinance. So these are the three paragraphs that we're noting today. The final two are the new sections. And basically what we're trying to do is accommodate property owners, business owners who want to attract more attention through the rear exits. And we see a lot of those happening. On the alleyways, there's very little improvements back there now, because some of these were occupied by vehicular traffic. In this case, this is the 100 block on the west side of Santa Fe. This is north. There are some small steps here that intrude onto the alleyway itself, but when a property owner, business owner does want to make an improvement like an awning there, then there is a license agreement for that. The improvements that you would see on sidewalk signs, outdoor furniture, would not require the license agreement that a physical structure itself would take in there. This shows another one. In some cases, the buildings themselves don't have a step there. And in those cases, we have had comments from business property owners requesting steps to make those rear entrances more accessible as well. This shows an improvement in 2016 where the Blue Sky Brewery had a step that didn't meet code coming out at the alleyway at the east facade of the building. In this case, there was a step introduced in there, as well as a guardrail. So what we're looking at is, while there are physical improvements like that, there are also temporary improvements that businesses would like to place back there, and that's generating our staff report today. Under your options today, you would have the option to recommend approval of the proposed set of amendments to Section 3540.2 as drafted and recommended by staff. You could recommend approval of the proposed set of amendments with any modifications, additions, or deletion the board deems appropriate, or you could postpone consideration to acquire additional content requested by the board. And under option 4, you could recommend that these proposed changes not be adopted if you feel strongly that these are not in the best interests of downtown. Under our staff recommendation, we would recommend approval of the proposed changes. We believe this is a more streamlined process for applicants and provide more flexibility to respond to the changing conditions in the downtown. So at this point, staff would be glad to answer any questions the board has.
Thanks, John. Does anybody have any questions for staff?
So John, on the alleyway, is it defined as to how, I know it says that it can't, well, I gotta find it, obstruct vehicle traffic, but is there any depth from the building itself or from the other side? Can they put it in the middle of the walkway, or does it have to be up against the building? Is there any kind of defining rules on that now?
On that, we also have a map of where our bollards are currently located, and these are a series of bollards that are actually removable through downtown. And while this is a little hard to see, I did place a copy up at your dais there. And what we're looking at is something that would apply to the building, be temporary in nature, or be right next to the building, just to maintain 5 foot of traffic way, vehicle for foot traffic along there. But the improvements themselves would be located up against the businesses. A lot of these are separated right now by curbs. In this case, this is the 100 block of North. It does have a bollard that blocks it off from the south, as well as the north. And this is up by Astra, and this is really closed to vehicular traffic unless there's maintenance or snow removal underway there. So typically that would be improvements that are placed up against or in the very vicinity of the building itself. They're meant to attract attention as well as delineate what businesses they are, because some of those don't have signage in the back that would benefit from this, drawing attention to themselves.
Do we have guidelines on the front of the business as far as the sandwich signs, how far out they are from the building? Or, I mean, can they just put them 4 foot out in the middle?
Your packet attached to the report is this outdoor furniture, movable sign, administrative regulations. That contains the regulations for height, width, display hours, and it also specifies that they can't be more than 3 feet away from a building facade. And so we would have to develop similar guidelines to that to deal with the rear alley situation, and we would bring those to you for your review and comment before they were implemented. But those things are not in the ordinance. Those are in the regulations that implement the ordinance, and we would have to go in and amend those as well to establish those specifications. Because right now the guidelines just refer to public sidewalks and plazas and doesn't even mention alleys, so we'd have to go in there and amend that. But whatever we would propose, we would bring back to this board to review and comment on. Most of our sidewalks are actually wider than our 10-foot alleys.
So if we approve this today, will they be allowed to place the signs in the back before those guidelines have been implemented?
Well, what our purpose is in today is that because the ordinance requires this board to review and approve each and every movable object out there, we're proposing to streamline that and make it administrative, and so we would certainly not do that without discussing with you and getting your thoughts and recommendations on that. If you have a favorable recommendation to these steps, then this would go to the City Commission to consider as a change to the city code. And then if that was adopted, we would develop the administrative guidelines to implement it in the alley areas, but before they went into effect, we would share them with you. But the first step is to see if you understand and are supportive of these changes, and then if you are supportive, then this would be put into ordinance form and taken to the governing body to see if they want to adopt it. And then if they do, we would change the regulations to carry that direction out. But our experience was looking at other communities that had provisions for sidewalk signs. Most of them, it was an administrative process, not something that went to a board for review. There's plenty of other activity and projects in the downtown area that are going to come to you for review that are probably bigger in scale than a pot or a sandwich board sign. So.
And then second question, number 3, authorizing the city manager to promulgate and amend the administrative regulations. Did you say that he then has to take those before the city commission?
What happened was, and we're not sure if it was intentional or unintentional, but this ordinance was passed in 1999, and that ordinance delegated the authority to the city manager to develop the administrative regulations. So Jason Gage was then the assistant city manager, and he developed those regulations, and they were just implemented through the city manager's office. In 2014, when we asked to add the bike racks and planters in addition to pots to the ordinance, the way the attorneys drafted it was that the city manager develops the regulations and the city commission ratifies them. So, however, they had just got done with the sidewalk dining guidelines, and the city attorneys drafted those such that the city manager would promulgate those regulations. So, since these are, the sidewalk dining and this are very similar, the rationale was that if there's changing conditions or something that comes up, just having the city manager be able to adjust a regulation or a dimension is more, can be done more quickly than amending an ordinance, which requires a first and second reading and a number of steps. So the idea was to, one, from 1999 to 2014, the regulations were authorized by the city manager, not the city commission. And then this last year we made a change to the sidewalk dining guidelines so that they were developed by the city manager and didn't go to the city commission. So the idea is just by having them be administrative, it allows us to adjust to situations that come up without having to go back to the city. Because it took us, by my count, it took us like 3 years to get the ordinance amended to add the word planters and bike racks.
I think I lived through that.
Just because it's not always easy to amend an ordinance. So the idea is that it worked before to have the regulations developed by the city manager, so we would just like to go back to that. With the caveat that if we were changing anything, even though the city manager could develop them, we would bring them to this board for your review and comment.
Anybody have any additional questions or any discussion on any of these 3 changes?
Not really. No, just make sure I understand that this board would then, we would be the appeal.
Right. If somebody wanted to put up, I mean, I don't know if it's a perfect example, but tried to give some flexibility so the ordinance allows a business to have a reasonable number of pots or a reasonable number of planters in front of their business. And let's say a business had 4 potted plants in front of their business and they wanted to put 2 more in. And if we said, no, we're not approving that because you already have a reasonable number and 6 is unreasonable, they could appeal our determination that that wasn't reasonable to you, and that you would then review that to see if you agreed or disagreed. Or if the way we looked at a sign, we said, no, your sign is too tall, we're not approving it, and they said, well, this is a unique design and you're not measuring our sign correctly, they could bring that to the board and say, staff is incorrectly measuring our sign and it's not as tall as they say it is, and they could bring that to you for your review and decision. That's really not available now. We just really don't have a process because it's not. Right now, those things go to you as a board, but we don't have a safety valve or anything to say, you say you've got too many potted plants already, we're not approving this. We don't have a safety valve of an appeal there. So the idea is that if there are some things that you can do downstairs or downtown in the facade of your building, and we approve it administratively by staff. And there's a provision in the Design Review Board ordinance that says if staff won't approve a certificate of compatibility for your minor work, you can appeal that to this board. And so this just makes it consistent with that to say if staff's going to review and approve these, if we have an owner who is dissatisfied with our determination, that then they can bring that before this board for final decision.
If we deny it at the board level, do they still get the opportunity to go to City Commission and appeal it?
Yeah, the way that this was, the reason we have that language in there is that shall be conducted in the manner outlined in section 2211. That is the Design Review Board ordinance, and that sets up the process where conceivably, although it's unusual, you have a minor facade change or an awning with no sign, and city staff, for whatever reason, doesn't approve it. They can appeal that denial to you, and if you deny it, they can appeal that denial to the City Commission. So our reference there to section 2211, that sets out the process which allows someone who's dissatisfied with your decision to appeal it to the City Commission.
So just the same as all of our other
Right.
decisions.
This is kind of trying to make that line up better with what we do with the certificate of compatibility. This is even a little bit confusing to staff because section 2 of the code is the Design Review Board ordinance, but this whole thing on the street furniture and all is in section 35 of the code, which is in a whole separate. So some of what we're trying to do here is make these dovetail a little bit, even though they're in different sections of the code.
Nobody has any additional thoughts?
I just have a quick question regarding the appeal timeline. It says 14 calendar days, even though if we are in the month of December where we have a lot of days off. So do they get any extra days or just 14 days?
Well, that again is consistent with our certificate of compatibility. So, and it's consistent with our zoning. It's consistent with most of the things we have across the board. It basically says that if you are aggrieved by a decision that's made and you want to appeal it, it doesn't mean it has to be heard then. It just means it has to be filed within 14 days. Because you as a board and we as you wouldn't want a situation where you've acted on something and then 7 months later somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to appeal that. Well, for all of our other boards and applications, if it's important to you, then you need to have your appeal or your protest in within 14 days, and that is consistent. Doesn't mean if the board, because of people's schedules or whatever, that can't be heard at the very next meeting, all it means is if you don't protest it or appeal it within 14 days after the decision, that's it. But it doesn't mean that it has to be heard immediately. It just means if you want to preserve your right to appeal, preserve your right to protest, you have to submit it within 14 days. Because if it was open-ended, it would be pretty chaotic.
No further questions? Then I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the proposed set of amendments to Section 3540.2 ordinances drafted and recommended by staff.
Second to aye.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second to approve the 3 changes to the existing ordinances as recommended and identified as the staff. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay.
So what will happen next is that we'll take this as a recommendation to the city commission. We'll see if they want to amend the ordinance. If they do, we'll work with the city manager to develop some guidelines on how close to the buildings and how much clear path there has to be. We will bring those to you to let you review those before they would be implemented or go into effect.
Okay. Do we have any other items on our agenda today, John?
We don't have any administrative items or preliminary discussion items. We will have a meeting on August 23rd, and we'll be reviewing a demolition proposal in the vicinity of 5th Street and Mulberry, where an additional house is being included in the development of parking lots for the hotel, as well as a small improvement to the Assurance Partners building. They have a deck in the rear, the building that's on the side visible from 5th Street, and they're going to be placing a canopy there to have a covered area to cook and serve. So it would be those 2 items.
All right. Okay, well, if we have no further items today, then would anybody care to motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
So I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, thanks, guys.